Grace and peace to you from God our Father and from our Lord and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. So dear family, friends of Mt.Calvary, all gathered here today, when you think of it, freedom always presents a compelling story. Think about what you learn in school as the great moments in history, or even just think about movies. What are the greatest moments even in movies? They all have freedom as kind of a central element of their plot. Take, for example, the movie Braveheart. You know, that movie came out back when I was in high school. I remember my friends and classmates flocking to see the movie, I think because they liked the blood and the guts and the war scenes. But actually the movie wasn't about that. It was the story of a Scottish freedom fighter. His name was William Wallace, as we see him here, played by Mel Gibson. And as the movie goes, you see his story, and as the movie's drawing to a close, it's really the climax of the whole movie. William's about to be put to death when his executioner presents him with an option. You can have a much faster and less painful death if you renounce your loyalty to Scotland and instead pledge your loyalty to the English king. Well, William Wallace, as he's there, he musters up all of his breath, he musters up all of his strength to shout out as loud as he can, "Freedom!" And it's the strongest and most memorable part of the whole movie because that's what he was all about. He was all about freedom. Now the question for us is, what does freedom have to do with Christianity? And the answer to that is, really, it has everything to do with Christianity. Freedom's really been an emphasis throughout the whole book of Galatians. We've been working through it over the past several weeks. But today, in chapter 5, the Apostle Paul really brings that topic of freedom, the freedom that the Christian has, he brings it under the microscope for us to look at. So as we look at it today, we'll see, first of all, what we are set free from, but then on top of that, what we are set free for. And so we'll be looking at Galatians chapter 5, beginning at verse 1 and then verse 13 through 25, where the Apostle Paul writes, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under law. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, factions and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. Those who belong to Jesus Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. And since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit." And this is God's word. As we begin to look at this, I want to begin by highlighting an important distinction. Often when people today think about freedom, we think of freedom something like this. Freedom is that I can do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, as long as I'm just not hurting someone else. So today, we tend to think of freedom as more the absence of restrictions, the absence of restraints. And so I've heard this kind of freedom defined or called, I've heard it called absolute negative freedom. It's not really a freedom that's for anything, but it's more the absence of things that stop you from doing whatever it is that you want to do. And so what I'd like to offer you today is that as we work through this text, that this absolute negative freedom, I think what I'd like you to find out is that this absolute negative freedom really isn't a freedom at all, but rather it leads into another form of slavery. But the freedom that the Apostle Paul speaks of here, the one that he describes, that it's a greater freedom, and it's a more beautiful freedom than just the absence of restraints and restrictions. So he opens this section by saying, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. So this opening verse, it's a call to hold on to freedom and to not go back to slavery. So then to get a handle on what this freedom is, we have to ask, well, what's the slavery? What is the slavery that we have been set free from? Now, this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but I can readily myself bring to mind 4 things that Jesus has set us free from. Now, those 4 things are slavery to sin, slavery to guilt, slavery to work righteousness, and finally slavery to self-righteousness. You see, we are a slave to whatever it is that we obey. If you obey something, then that thing, whatever it is your master. So if we obey sin, it means that sin is our master and we are a slave to sin. So the defining characteristic of our human nature, it's really a profound self-centeredness. A self-centeredness rather than a God-centeredness. A self-centeredness rather than an other-centeredness. And that's the essence of sin, is not worrying about God, not worrying about other people, but only worrying about yourself. So if we're out in life only to please ourselves, if the only perspective that you can see is your own perspective, if you are more driven by your own happiness than by anything else, that's slavery to sin. If guilt controls you, then you're a slave to guilt. What's guilt? It's that feeling that we get that we haven't done what's right. And then with that, it's a fear that there's going to be some kind of a consequence for not having done what's right. And just think about our lives. How much of our lives are driven by guilt? We have guilt over our work schedules. When those work schedules prevent us from spending the time that we feel we need to spend with our family, but then when we actually spend time with our family, we have guilt that we're not working as much or as hard as we should. We have guilt over things that happen in our life that we have absolutely no control over. Think about how many children blame themselves for their parents' arguments. And as a society, we think that we can get rid of guilt if we only get rid of God, stop talking about God, stop thinking about God, stop any references to God, but even atheist pagan philosophers will say that even if you get rid of God, we still have guilt, because guilt is unavoidable. And no matter how relativistic we are, we still have guilt. And when that guilt drives our actions, when that guilt drives our attitudes, when it drives our decisions, we become a slave to that guilt. Finally, if you are controlled by work righteousness, you're a slave to that too. You see, another part of our human nature is that we're born with this spirit that believes, if I do good, that I will be rewarded for that. I'll be rewarded for that good, whether it's in this life or in the next. And so you can become a slave to work righteousness if you spend all of your time doing good things, but not because those good things are just good to do, but because you feel that you earn something with those good things that you do. You know, if you believe that your eternity hangs in the balance of all the good things that you do, if you truly believe that, isn't it easy to become obsessed? Become obsessed with doing good things and doing more good things than all the other people around you, and to do those good things, again, not for the right reasons, but because you're going to get something out of it. And when we're a slave to work righteousness, life ends up turning into a big competition, because I need to do more good than all of you, and if I don't do more good than all of you, then I feel like I'm not good enough. So work righteousness often leads to self-righteousness. If things are going well, I feel like I'm better than a lot of people, and I do more good than all of you people out there. But what if you mess up? Then it leads to despair, when we feel like we're not measuring up to all the other people. And so what we see is that Jesus has set us free from all of these, from sin, from guilt, from work righteousness, self-righteousness. He's done it all by his perfect life that he lived in our place, by his death on the cross, and by his resurrection from the dead. You see, by his perfect life, he earned a perfect status before God with that life, and God accepts you and me on the basis of the perfect life that Jesus lived in our place. And because of that, he sets us free from work righteousness and self-righteousness. Those works that we do, they don't earn us anything, so we're set free from that. Moving on the cross, Jesus took the punishment that we had deserved for all of our sin, and because of that, God declares us to be justified. The word justified simply means not guilty. And so we don't have to fear condemnation, because all that condemnation came down upon Jesus on the cross. And so he gives us real forgiveness. And as a result of that real forgiveness, there's also freedom from guilt. On top of that, even Jesus rose from the dead, and now he lives in those who believe in him. When he takes up residence in you, he breaks the power of sin over you. You're free from its control, so sin is no longer your master. So it's for freedom from these things, from sin, from guilt, from work righteousness, self-righteousness, that Jesus has set you free. Well, there's a saying in America that freedom isn't free. Freedom always comes at a price. And the price that Jesus paid to set us free from those things, it was his own life as the Son of God. And so now, considering the price that Jesus paid, now that Jesus has set us free, the absolute last thing that we would want to do is give that freedom up. And that's why the Apostle Paul calls us to stand firm and not be burdened again by slavery. Well, how do we stand firm? I would say the essence of standing firm means recognizing not only what we have been set free from, but also what we have been set free for. And that's why Paul goes on to say, you, my brothers and sisters, you're called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. So we're set free to serve one another out of love. Then we might ask, well, why does he use strong phrasing? Stand firm. That's a strong phrasing. That's strong wording. Why does he talk that way when it comes to holding on to our freedom? He talks that way because there is something about all of us that makes keeping that freedom hard. Why would he tell you to stand firm if holding on to that freedom was easy? So Paul describes that what makes it difficult by saying the flesh desires what's contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what's contrary to the flesh. They're in conflict with one another. His point there is that every single one of us has two conflicting desires within us. We have, on one hand, we have the Spirit, which is the Holy Spirit who lives within us. And on the other hand, we have the flesh, sometimes the flesh also known as our sinful nature, also living within us. And these two things, they do not want the same things. The flesh is set on things like sexual immorality, idolatry, hatred, jealousy, ambition, envy, things like that. The Spirit's presence in us, however, produces things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, and things like that. So we have these two sets of desires within us. And as we take a closer look at them, we'll see one set of these desires enslaves us, and the other set of desires exercises freedom. So the question for us is, which one is which? Let's take a closer look at those desires themselves. When you look at the desires of the flesh, think about for a moment how many of those desires are self-feeding. Somebody does something that hurts you a lot, and what do you want for that person? You want to hate that person, right? You give in to hating that person, and then what happens? It's suddenly easier to hate another person. You give in to hating that person, suddenly easier to hate somebody else and somebody else on top of that. Jealousy works the same way. Become jealous of one person, and suddenly it's two and three, and so on down the line. Selfish ambition, the desire to promote yourself, the desire to acquire more power and control for yourself, that's never satisfied. The more power you get, the more power you want. Envy is always going to find somebody to be angry at because they have it better than you. And sexual immorality, just think of the addicting power of pornography. These desires of the flesh, they lead you back into slavery again. I'd like you to think back about that absolute negative freedom we talked about just a moment before. How often do we want that freedom, freedom from restrictions? How often do we want that just to chase after these desires that are going to lead us back into slavery again? I don't hear of anyone saying, I want to be free from restrictions so that I can have more joy. I want to be free from restrictions so that I can be patient with people. I want to be free from restrictions so that I can show more self-control. Nobody says that. We want the freedom from restrictions to pursue these desires that enslave us. But love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, there's no slavery in those things. And that's why the Apostle Paul writes, against such things there is no law. So we stand firm in the freedom that Jesus won for us. We stand firm in that by serving one another in love. And so where do we get that ability? That ability to serve based out of love? Well, all those good desires, the love, joy, peace, and so on, here they're all called fruit of the Spirit, which means then that they're evidence of the Spirit's presence in our life. Just like you know that an apple tree is an apple tree when you look at that tree and you see the apples on it, so also you know that somebody who produces love, joy, patience, and the rest, that person has the Spirit of God in them. So how does one get the Spirit of God? How does one have a Spirit-filled life? There's only one way that happens, and it's through the gospel, through the good news of Jesus Christ. One of the more often misunderstood things that Jesus said was when he talked about baptizing with the Holy Spirit. I think we often get hung up on that word baptize. We think about he's talking about some kind of special act or something like that. Really, he's not. He's using the word in its simple original sense. Outside of the New Testament, when that word baptize was used, it simply was talking about pouring out water on something. And so Jesus, when he said, I will baptize you with the Holy Spirit, he's talking about just the way you pour out water on something, I'm going to pour out the Holy Spirit on you. And so Jesus pours out the Holy Spirit on us, his people, when we hear of his work as it's described in the Bible. He pours out his Spirit when people hear that Jesus, the Son of God, came to earth, lived perfectly in their place, died for us on a cross, and that because Jesus did this, you're acceptable to God and accepted by him now and forever. And on top of that, you're also forgiven for all the times that you pursued those desires of the flesh. And through that message, when you hear that message, Jesus pours out the Spirit on you. And when you believe that message, that is, when that message penetrates your heart, and when you know from the core of your being that you're saved not by your superior life, but you're saved entirely by Jesus' work for you, by God's grace, then you're free to serve one another in love. Think for a moment in your head, what are all the wrong reasons to serve someone? What are all the wrong reasons to do good for someone else? Got any in your mind? I know the ones that come most readily to me is, maybe if I do this good thing for this person, maybe they'll pay me back. Maybe I'll get paid for it. Or maybe if I do this good thing, then it'll come back to me in some way or another, whether it's tomorrow or in a month or in a year. Pay it forward, somebody will pay me back in the future. Or maybe God will owe me, God will give me an extra special place, an extra special smile if I do this. Or, maybe this person will notice me and they'll go tell their friends how much of a wonderful person I am. When you're in Jesus Christ, you're free to serve simply out of love. You see, in Jesus, you have an eternal reward that's more than 1 million times greater than anything that any other person can do for you on this earth. So what does it matter anymore if they can pay you back? In Jesus Christ, you have God, the creator and sustainer of the universe, smiling down upon you. So what does it matter if another person notices you and tells their friends how wonderful you are? See, in Jesus Christ, all the wrong reasons to serve, they all go away. And the only reason that remains is love. Love for Jesus and love for others. See, in Jesus Christ, you're free, and you're free to deal with one another in love. You're free to show patience. You're free to be kind, even to people who aren't kind to you. You're free to have joy, even when life deals you a downer. You're free to spread peace into a world that's full of hatred and hostility, and you're free to serve one another in love. And the power to serve comes from seeing Jesus serve you. As you see him live his life, as you read the Gospels, and as you see all the things that Jesus did, you see his love for you. You can also see how patient he is with you. You can see his kindness and gentleness toward you, his goodness and his faithfulness. And you can see the culmination of all these things when Jesus lays down his life for you on a cross. And that's what sets you free. And that's what empowers you to serve. So in Jesus Christ, you're free. You're free from slavery to sin, to guilt, to work righteousness, self-righteousness, but you're also free to serve one another in love. Amen.